Okay, hello everyone. I'm Adrienne Klein. I am the Programs and Community Specialist here at the Oregon Bioscience Incubator. Welcome to this Lunch and Learn FDA programs to facilitate and expedite the development of new drugs. This is the final installment of our FDA series. So while we get settled, we do have some housekeeping items. So all participants are muted upon entering this event. Please remain on mute unless you do have a question. Feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, ask the question. You can also put your questions in the chat. We will answer them as we go along. I believe we do have some time at the end too for some Q&A. So if you wanted to hold off until the end, that's perfectly fine too. We love to connect with you. So if you want to take a moment to put your LinkedIn in the chat, Lisa is here with me as well, and she will be putting my LinkedIn in the chat and also her LinkedIn as well, so you can connect with us. And later we'll have the LinkedIn for our speaker. We do have some upcoming events. Our next Accelerate Happy Hour is on Thursday, August 7th. We would love to see you there. And then we do have our big annual event happening on Thursday, September 11th, and space is limited. We would love to see you there, but you got to get your tickets very soon. Spots are filling up. Otrati would like to acknowledge the land we are all on, wherever you may be. Otrati conducts business throughout Portland and beyond and is making an effort to acknowledge the history of the area and work towards decolonization of the bioscience industry. To learn more about Portland's native, diverse, and vibrant community, please read Leading with Tradition, a document created by the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable. So we're going to put that link in the chat as well, so you can visit that. And before you leave today, at the end of the program, a survey is going to pop up at the end. It's very short, but it helps us decide where we want to take our programs to go and what you'd like to see us do. So please take just a moment to fill out the survey. That would be amazing. Thank you. All right, so we're going to introduce our speaker and then our sponsor. So first up, please welcome Dr. Elizabeth Gordon, a regulatory affairs expert with 34 years of pharmaceutical and FDA experience, specializing in drug and biologics development for rare diseases. Her leadership roles span multiple companies focusing on therapies from antifungals to gene-targeted treatments. She spent 6 years at the Food and Drug Administration, helping shape biological product regulation policy across the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research and the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. But first, a huge thank you to our virtual growth series sponsor, Rain Catalyst. So today we're going to hear from Rachel Jagoda Brunette, their CEO, and take it away, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. I will keep my remarks short because I know that there's a lot more interesting content coming up, but Rain is very pleased to be able to partner with you all on this. Just a quick introduction to who we are. Rain is an entrepreneurship support organization that works with entrepreneurs across Oregon and Washington, particularly those in rural communities, bringing resources from around the region and around the country to entrepreneurs at all stages of their journey. If anyone is interested in getting support from our venture catalysts or participating in any of our programs, please, feel free to reach out to me at any point. I will put my information in the chat or check our website at raincatalyst.org, which soon will be updated to have better access to a lot of our really fantastic programming. But we're very pleased to be able to support this program and a lot of the great work going on. So with that, I will hand it back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. We really enjoy partnering with Rain Catalyst. You guys really need to check them out. And without further ado, please, Dr. Elizabeth Gordon.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Everyone can see my screen?
Looks great.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for allowing me to present. If my voice goes in and out, I'm just getting over a COVID infection, so bear with me. And this is the third of and final FDA overview that I wanted to present to the group. First, we talked about, in the first session, we talked about the IND process and introducing unapproved drugs into human subjects in the United States and what is required to work with FDA and file with FDA to get your human testing started. The second session, we talked about how to communicate with FDA, in particular, specific meetings that FDA has encouraged sponsors to have with them. And with those meetings come certain requirements to request the meetings, to participate in the meetings, and then receive feedback from the FDA. All of those items in session 1 and 2 require close monitoring of the different disciplines that contribute to product development, as well as the timelines and regulatory requirements in order to have successful filings and successful meetings. Today's presentation, I wanted to focus on the FDA programs to incentivize sponsors to develop drugs and biologics for serious and life-threatening conditions. Oftentimes, these diseases are rare, very or ultra rare, impacting less than 2,000 people in the United States. And so it's sometimes hard to encourage sponsors to invest the money and negotiate with FDA, perhaps different non-clinical and toxicology requirements, and to make clinical trials more affordable and more endpoint directed for that population. And so there are a host of programs that FDA has on the books that help incentivize sponsors to pursue therapeutics that will help these very serious and life-threatening diseases, oftentimes very rare diseases. So I'm going to go through some of those programs: fast track designation, breakthrough therapy designation, qualified infectious disease product designation, priority review, accelerated approval, and then other incentive programs. There are a host of other programs that are in pilot phases, and you can find out more about them on the FDA.gov website. I'm not going to go over all of them, but there are a number of programs that are in pilot phases, and FDA is inviting maybe 10 sponsors to participate, and they just sort of want to see how it goes before they put it into general practice. I'm not going to go over all of those pilot programs, but I just wanted you to know that others exist if I didn't mention them. So the initial thinking that the FDA had on expediting availability to therapies for serious conditions and life-threatening conditions was actually codified in regulation. And these were these are in 21 CFR Part 312, which is the IND regulations, which is what we talked about a few sessions ago. The goal was to accelerate availability of new therapies when there's no satisfactory alternatives or there are no alternatives. And what this program does was maintain the requirements for the demonstration of safety and effectiveness, and also provides support from the agency, partnering with the agency so that you can make sure that you're doing it right the first time and you don't get rejected. There are treatment protocols available, which are we talked about this in session 1, where if you have demonstrated preliminary safety and efficacy and you're pursuing approval of a drug, you can open that drug up, even though it's not been approved, to treatment protocols and allow the patient population who needs it to get it while the drug is going through the regulatory process. The risk-benefit analysis changes for some of these drugs. For example, if you have a child with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, if severe vomiting and diarrhea are associated with the therapeutic, I've heard parents of these boys say, if it gives my kid an extra 5 years to live with me, we can deal with the vomiting and diarrhea. So for some of these therapeutics for very rare and serious infections, the risk-benefit analysis changes a little bit. There still is oftentimes a requirement for phase 4 studies, looking at to make sure that the endpoints that you were approved on early on were actually carried forward and shown to be beneficial. And there's also opportunities for grants and other regulatory research for these therapeutics for rare diseases and unmet medical needs. So as I said, the first that I'd like to talk about is fast track designation. This is a pretty sexy designation that people often apply for right in an initial IND submission. To qualify for fast track designation, you have to show that your therapeutic is intended to treat a serious condition, a serious disease, and their, day-to-day survival is impacted, or if left untreated, you get a more serious sequelae of the disease or death. So it's a matter of judgment, and it is the sponsor's responsibility to talk about the disease and its serious nature in order to convince FDA that this is indeed a candidate. You then have to show that your therapeutic has a potential to address this serious disease or the unmet medical need. And it's primarily done with early non-clinical research. And it can include some clinical data if you have it available, but most people just have really good pharmacology proof of concept studies. And you don't have to show that the disease has been cured or anything like that, but you can show that there's superior effectiveness over an existing therapy. You're avoiding adverse side effects. You are perhaps increasing patient compliance with the drug. And so you are able to pull on some of these things to justify the fast track designation. And you also have to talk a little bit about your development plan and show that your therapeutic actually will evaluate the unmet medical need. And we also talk about any other approved products for treating this condition and how your therapeutic will fit within the armamentarium. So how do you request this? Most people do it at the time of the initial IND, or it can be done anytime during the IND process. It's typically no later than the pre-IND or pre-BLA meeting, and the FDA is required to respond with their decision of granting fast track designation or not within 60 days of receipt of that request. And if you're a public company, this is an announceable event, and it's very important to companies. It's also very important to companies who are trying to raise money to be able to say that they have this designation, which means they've caught the attention of FDA. So what does it give me other than I can say I have fast track designation? Well, you apparently get close and early communications with FDA, quick responsive times. You still get the meetings that we talked about, pre-IND meetings, end of phase meetings, pre-BLA and NDA meetings, and you also get the written responses. You are eligible for priority review, which I'll talk about in a moment. You must request it. It's not an automatic. You are also eligible for rolling review, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. Again, you must request it and talk about how you're going to roll in different parts of your marketing application to the FDA, what will be contained in it, and when FDA can expect it. Communicating closely with the FDA once you're a fast track designated product is the way to pave the road to success. FDA, in my experience, has always provided timely input for my fast track products. They've never gone radio silent. The goal is for them to help you shepherd your drug through the development process. The key to this is that if for some reason you obtain data in the course of your development that shows that you're no longer meeting the requirements of fast track, it can actually be rescinded. Excuse me. The other is breakthrough therapy designation. This one is also quite important, and more so because it requires preliminary demonstration of clinical effectiveness or clinical evidence that the drug may have substantial improvement over other therapies, or it's actually addressing an unmet medical need. It's again, whether or not the clinical data that you're submitting to the FDA with your breakthrough therapy designation request is adequate is again a matter of judgment, and it's our job as a regulatory professional to convince the agency how good the data are so that they can grant this designation. For again, public companies, it's announceable. For smaller companies, it is an important designation because it shows that the FDA has recognized the clinical data that has been developed to support a breakthrough designation. So what is this preliminary clinical evidence? Perhaps it's an effect on an established surrogate endpoint, time to tumor progression versus survival in a cancer therapeutic. The surrogate endpoint would have to be reasonably likely to predict clinical benefit. Maybe there is an effect on a pharmacodynamic biomarker that doesn't meet the requirements of the surrogate endpoints validation, but strongly suggests that there is clinical benefit. Or maybe there's just a very significant improvement on the safety profile of the drug. So these are all criteria that could support a breakthrough therapy designation. I have applied for a few. I would say that it's not always easy to get. I've gotten a couple, but I've also been rejected from quite a number. The FDA is very, very stringent with regard to the body of data that's required to demonstrate a breakthrough therapy designation. It is, like I said, an important designation. It's very important to public and small companies as they're proceeding with development. How do you request breakthrough therapy designation? Again, at the time of the initial IND, if you have human data from another country, perhaps, or any time during the IND cycle, it's often done end of phase 1 or in phase 2. The request must be made prior, to the pre-NDA or pre-BLA meeting. And again, FDA has 60 days to grant the designation or reject the designation. And one thing that's very interesting about the breakthrough therapy designation is that FDA has awarded sponsors the opportunity to discuss their request for breakthrough therapy through a non-binding procedure. It is a 1 or 2 page document that you could submit to the FDA. And it's called a breakthrough therapy designation consultation. And you submit it to your IND and you tell the FDA what kind of data you have and what you're going to use to support breakthrough therapy designation. So you don't waste your time and FDA doesn't waste their time. They grant you a 15-minute telecon. You'll get no written communications, no documentation of anything, no record of telecon, and they'll just let you know what they think of what you've proposed. The advice, again, is non-binding until you submit your application for breakthrough therapy designation. I have done this. FDA has responded favorably. And the company went ahead and applied for breakthrough therapy designation, and it was granted. Just like fast track, the designation can be rescinded if it no longer meets qualifying criteria. What are the benefits of breakthrough therapy designation? Because you don't apply for any of these incentive programs unless it gives you something in return. Well, you get all of the same designation benefits as fast track, you know, communication, rapid communication, potential to apply for priority review, rolling review of your application. But it's the communications on this designation is much more engaging. There's a lot more intensive guidance from the agency that can begin as early as phase 1 to really help the sponsor develop this drug in the most efficient and beneficial manner. You know, again, it's important because you have presented the agency with some clinical data. Qualified infectious disease designation. This one's fairly new. This one came out in PDUFA 8. And what it is that FDA has recognized that drug companies are no longer developing new antibiotics and anti-infectives and antifungals, and we are seeing a uptick, a recognizable change in the development of antibiotic, antifungal, anti-infective resistance. And the armamentarium of the drugs that we currently have are no longer addressing these resistant organisms. So FDA put forward QIDP designation, and they listed a group of 21 pathogens that meet what they believe are important public health concern if we have resistance to them. So if you are developing a drug for one of these 21 pathogens, and you can show that you have preliminary evidence, like in an animal model, that your drug will address this pathogen, you're automatically given QIDP designation. And to incentivize these drug companies, you're granted an additional 5 years of exclusivity after approval, above and beyond everything else that you get for a new chemical entity or if you're an orphan drug. So a drug that receives QIDP designation is automatically allowed to qualify for fast track designation and apply for priority review, but you must request it. It's not automatically designated. You have to ask for it in a specific fast track designation request. You're saying, I'm requesting fast track designation. You don't have to apply, submit any additional data. You just say, because I've been QIDP designated. So you get both, 2 for 1. So I've spoken about rolling review in the last 3 incentive programs. So what does that mean and why is it important? So your marketing application, your NDA or your BLA, is composed of non-clinical studies, clinical studies, and a whole host of manufacturing information, how you make the drug, how you test it, some data on representative lots and consistency lots that are commercial scale. This is a huge amount of data that needs to be submitted to support a marketing application. So under the rolling review paradigm, once you're allowed to use rolling review, you communicate with FDA what sections of the application you want to roll in to be reviewed. And the review may or may not start of those complete sections, but at least you get it done and you get it into FDA. So it could be the manufacturing sections or CMC, non-clinical, or other sections of the application. The review of that section doesn't necessarily commence upon submission. It's up to FDA and whether or not they have the bandwidth and ability to work on that. But at least in my experience, when I've rolled in parts of an application, FDA will look at it, see if it's complete. They'll let you know if they've noticed any major concerns. And if they've got the time, they'll start reviewing and start giving you some feedback, which is really important because you want to be able to address any concerns that the agency might have sooner rather than later. However, the review time clock, whether you're a priority review application or a standard review application, doesn't begin until every section of the NDA is submitted. So the complete NDA is in. And you have to communicate with FDA how you're going to roll in the application and when, so that they can expect it and work with you on that. Rolling review is only allowed if you've submitted your user fee, if you are a user fee product, your pre-NDA and NDA meetings are complete. In other words, you've told the FDA about your NDA and what's going to be contained in it. And then FDA responds in writing with an agreement to what's going to be reviewed and when. So they're committing to you that they're going to shepherd you through the agency with rolling in parts of the application. If you make any changes to that, you have to get agreement from the FDA. But again, only complete sections are accepted. So you can't say, oh, well, I don't have the final tox report. That'll come later. The FDA will then reject the ability to roll in your non-clinical section if, say, a tox study is not ready. Priority review. Many of these incentive programs that we just talked about allow for you to request priority review. And what does this mean? This means that the FDA will commit to you to review your application as a priority, meaning they will review cover to cover a complete application in 6 months. There's a certain percentage in the user fee law that FDA will review in 4 months. But I think that most people just count on 6 months. That's in contrast to 10 to 12 months for a standard review. So everything that's not priority review becomes standard review. And 6 months versus 12 months for hearing back FDA's feedback is huge, especially since you could get on the market sooner. 6 months of being able to market something and get a drug to patients sooner is a very big impact on that patient population. Priority review gets confused with approval time. It's review time of cover to cover. And it is not an approval time. It is the time to get a complete response letter. And that is all of the FDA's concerns on the application cover to cover. This is not priority review is not necessarily linked to only fast track or breakthrough therapy products or accelerated approval products. If you have a drug that you are submitting to the agency that has some sort of unmet medical need or treatment for a life-threatening disease, it's often considered priority review. It's not going to be your blood pressure medication, for example. When you have your pre-NDA and pre-BLA meeting, that's the time that you discuss priority review versus standard review and what your justification is for requesting priority review. And oftentimes the agency will give you a thumbs up or thumbs down on priority review at your pre-NDA or pre-BLA meeting. But they have to respond in writing within 60 days of the submission of the application. And that is during the we call it a filing review. So the FDA has 60 days to review the application once it's filed to see if it's complete. And that is in addition to the 6 months or the 10 to 12 months, you tack on another 60 days to make sure that the application is complete. This is why you need a regulatory professional to calendar all this stuff for you. Priority review vouchers. This is a pretty controversial thing. Priority review vouchers are issued by FDA as an incentive to encourage people to develop drugs for specific diseases, often rare diseases, neglected diseases, tropical diseases, rare pediatric diseases. This voucher is issued at the time of approval of a drug. And what it allows a company to do is shorten an application review time for a different drug, for another drug in the pipeline that you may be developing, not the drug that was awarded the review voucher, but an unrelated drug. The interesting thing about priority review vouchers is that they can be sold, and they are sold to other companies, the highest bidder. And right now, I have seen $100 million for a priority review voucher. Because if you think about it, if you can get on the market in 6 months versus 12 months, think about how much money that is for a company, and big pharma will pay big bucks to get their drug on the market fast. The pediatric priority review vouchers expired on September 20th, 2024, which was very controversial. A lot of advocacy groups that are supporting the development of pediatric rare diseases are up in arms and have been petitioning their congresspeople to find a way to re-implement the pediatric priority review vouchers. Unfortunately, it was an oversight by the Biden administration. It was just tucked away in, at the end of the federal fiscal year. And it just expired without notice, and Congress didn't act in time to renew it. So I think last I heard, we are still waiting to see what will happen. There's been a lot of parent groups and advocacy groups petitioning Congress to push for this reauthorization, and we're in another user fee or PDUFA negotiation. So we may see it resurrect, and I hope that that is indeed the case. Accelerated approval, similar to the accelerated approval regs I talked about before under 312, which are the IND regs. These are the NDA approval regs. And what it talks about was the allowance of a surrogate endpoint to be used to approve a drug, the clinical trials would use that surrogate endpoint. And this surrogate endpoint is usually one that's been validated or generally accepted to predict clinical benefit. And it's used rather than survival or irreversible mortality. You know, a lot of cancer drugs have markers, progression markers, time to tumor progression and whatnot that are predictors of survival. And so rather than doing a clinical trial that's 5 years on cancer patients, we're trying hard to see if we can get drugs on the market using reliable surrogates. You do get an approval and you can market the drug, but the approval is conditional until you do phase 4 confirmational studies that clinical benefit has been confirmed. In other words, you would have to monitor survival, for example, if that was the case. All of the studies for accelerated approval have to be they have to be adequate and well controlled, and they have to show that the drug meets safety requirements and efficacy requirements. If for some reason the approval cannot be, approval can't be confirmed by additional studies or phase 4 studies, the overall approval of the drug can be withdrawn, and that's been in the news also for a few products that were approved in the last years. There was, I think it was a Biogen product, and if somebody knows, they can correct me, where the confirmatory studies did not confirm what accelerated approval surrogate endpoints demonstrated, and the drug actually was withdrawn from the market. Here's a new one. This is from the current administration. It's the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher. And it was announced in a pilot program on June 17th, 2025. And the purpose is to accelerate the review of drugs that align with national health priorities by granting a priority review, but this is not a 6-month review. It's a 1 to 2 month review. I have a lot of questions about this program. In other words, what is a U.S. national health priority, and who decides what that priority is? What is a qualifying drug application? You know, in other words, who decides what is an adequate or qualifying NDA or BLA? The goal is to have these drugs reviewed instead of 10 to 12 months or 6 months to have them reviewed in 1 to 2 months. And it is for apparently innovative therapies. Innovative therapies was not defined in this announcement, so I'm not really sure what it is they're looking for. It also said in the announcement that the majority of data will be submitted before the clinical trial is complete. So the trial can be ongoing in the United States or throughout the world, and you can submit data under like a rolling review fashion, although they didn't mention the words rolling review. The only thing they specified was that the full CMC section or manufacturing section and the final product labeling needed to be submitted to the FDA 60 days prior to the final application that would begin the 1 to 2 month review. So I think there's a lot of questions still there. And, you know, one of the things that the new commissioner talked about was, well, we do these kind of reviews in a tumor board review. So why can't we do it at FDA? Well, you know, we have a 1-day tumor review board, so we should be able to review a full NDA in 1 to 2 months. They've not seen the volume of data, but we'll see how the commissioner handles it. The FDA under this program can grant an accelerated approval if the drug is eligible And the vouchers can be directed by the FDA to a specific drug, so they can actually look through and say, hey, you're investigating something that is important to US national health priorities. Have you considered, have you considered this program? So we'll see how this all shakes out. I have not heard anybody pursuing this yet. So maybe when we get to the Q&A, if somebody's got any more experience in this, we would love to hear what you have to share. So in this slide, it's overwhelming, all the stuff that we've just talked about and all these different incentive programs that are eligible to people who are developing drugs for serious and life-threatening diseases. So really, what does this mean? So I sort of put this table together, looking at fast track with rolling review, priority review, and the commissioner's new CNPV voucher. The products under fast track are for serious conditions with an unmet medical need. They must be submitted during the IND stage. Rolling review can submit complete sections to the NDA as they're completed, and the review time, once the full application has been submitted, is 10 to 12 months, because just because you're fast track doesn't mean that you are a priority review. Priority review, on the other hand, are products with potential to provide major improvements in safety and efficacy of existing therapies. And oftentimes they are fast track drugs and they are breakthrough therapy drugs. Again, it can be requested anytime ahead of the submission of an NDA. It's requested oftentimes during the pre-NDA BLA meetings. Early submission of the sections are not allowed, so you can't participate in rolling review unless you are a fast track or a breakthrough drug, and the review time cover to cover is 6 months. The commissioner's new voucher program is, I would say, probably products for biodefense, products that are addressing a critical supply chain gap or some public health emergency. Maybe, COVID was an example of a public health emergency where we were trying to get the vaccines tested and reviewed as quickly as possible, as well as the therapeutics like Paxlovid. For the commissioner's program, you have to apply during the IND phase, and if you're granted the ability to follow this track, it expires in 2 years, and you must submit the full CMC section and the draft labeling about 60 days before the NDA remaining parts. And apparently you're going to get a full review in 1 to 2 months of the entire application. Orphan drug designation. I think I talked a little bit about this in session 1. This is also codified in Regulation 316. It's a written request. It's a form, an electronic form that's transmitted to the Orphan Drug Office. And you have to show prevalence information that the disease impacts 200,000 or fewer people in the United States, or that there's no reasonable expectation that the cost of drug development can be recovered in sales in the United States. And this is often because it's a very rare disease. There's a special form, as I said, it's online, you fill it out, and the FDA Orphan Drug Office collaborates with the Product Review Office to determine whether or not this is indeed a quantifiable or a orphan disease based on the prevalence, and they work hand in hand. There is no time frame in which FDA responds to whether or not you're going to be granted orphan drug designation. I've waited 2 months. I've waited 18 months. So that's a little bit frustrating. But they have so many other things that are FDA is required to respond to in a certain time frame that orphan drug designation requests often fall to the wayside. It can be orphan drug designation can be requested anytime prior to the submission of a marketing application. It's allows FDA and the Orphan Drug Office, when you have meetings, oftentimes you will let the Orphan Drug Office know that you're meeting with the FDA, especially if you want support from them. FDA again is supposed to help you with developing the drug for this population. It allows you for treatment use once you're or treatment IND once you have submitted your marketing application, and you will get an additional 7 years of market exclusivity after your drug is approved. So think about it. You'll get 7 years for this. And then if you're QIDP orphan, you'll get 5 years for that. So that's 12 right there, which is really great. And then tax credits for your clinical development costs. It used to be 50% on qualified trials. It's now 25% on qualified trials. And Congress in the last number of years has been revisiting this tax credit. They've not done anything about it yet, but it's on their radar to eliminate this tax credit for orphan drug designated products. And what's also important is the exemption from user fees if you're an orphan designated product. The cost you have to pay now to have your NDA reviewed, and you can request exemptions from user fees if you're a small company and it's your first drug, but they exceed I don't even remember what they are, $4 million now. It's a lot. You're exempt from user fees if you're orphan drug designated. Special protocol assessment. This program I think is maybe a little underutilized. I'm not sure if people know about it, but it's the opportunity to submit a pivotal clinical trial, a animal carcinogenicity protocol. Those are 5-year clinical studies, non-clinical tox studies. Studies that address the animal rule, meaning there are no human you can't test a drug because there is no circulating infection. So we use animal efficacy protocols. It allows FDA to review the protocol, comment on it, go through numerous review cycles to be sure that FDA doesn't change their mind and the sponsor knows exactly what they need to do in order to meet a certain requirement by FDA. There's been horror stories of people finishing their pivotal clinical trials only for the FDA to say, that trial wasn't adequate and you should have done X, Y, and Z. The SPA gets a commitment from the FDA that this trial will be adequate if you get the results that you believe you're going to get, that the study was designed to give you. There are 45-day review cycles, and you don't do it once. It can happen 4 times, 45 days each time. So, it can go on. And so some people don't use it and they take their chances based on discussions during meetings and hope that they will get an okay when the data comes in. But Yeah, I think if it's done right, an SPA can work. I've done one with a client for an antibiotic, and we had to go through 2 rounds before we got the okay. And then Split is one of those, Split Real-Time Application Review STAR is one of those pilot programs that I wanted to highlight. It came out in PDUFA 7. We're negotiating PDUFA 8 now. Again, it's a pilot program, and it will allow applications, accepted STAR applications will be submitted in a split fashion, specifically 2 parts, with the components submitted about 2 months apart. It just allows for a faster review. The issue that people have with some of these pilot programs, and there's a whole host of them for accelerated approval and for genetic diseases, is that once you're selected to participate in a pilot program, you have to allow FDA to announce who you are, what you're developing. It allows them to have you present, require you to present what you're doing and how it's working. And companies like to keep their technologies and their development plans close to their chest. They don't want their competitors to know. So I know that when I was working for a company in San Diego a few years ago, we looked at a lot of these pilot programs because they were a perfect fit for us. But the board of directors was very, very keen on keeping what we were doing to ourselves, because the competition was pretty strong, and they wanted to release information on their progress on their terms. So I don't know whether or not many of these programs are filled, and whether or not these pilot folks, the people who are participating in the pilots, are as great as FDA had hoped that they would be. I think I kind of went over this. So in conclusion, there are a number of mechanisms for the FDA to incentivize sponsors to develop drugs for rare diseases, for diseases or therapeutics that address an unmet medical need. And we talked about what I believe are the most important ones and the ones that are most frequently used. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be more in the pipeline, but they all, in good spirit, try to get drugs onto the market faster than typically available, than typical for a standard drug. Finally, I put some references up here for you to look into if this is an area that is of interest to you, or where you want more information based on the programs that you're working on. And of course, I do believe that FDA's website is a great resource for all kinds of information, guidance documents on specific drugs and specific diseases. And if you're in the drug development arena, it's important to familiarize yourself with what FDA has to offer. And they offer a lot of free workshops too. So you just have to sign up for those. Those are typically Zoom calls. And so that's a conclusion. Any questions?
Yeah, we've got some time for some questions. I think while we wait for people to gather questions together, I just wanted to remind everyone that you can connect with Elizabeth Gordon on LinkedIn. We did drop her LinkedIn in the chat here, so feel free to do that. And if you want to connect with any of us, please feel free to do that as well. Do we have time for questions? Do we have any questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can ask in the chat and I'll read it for you.
Hi, Elizabeth. This is Colin. I had a question regarding the RMAT designation. I didn't really see you touch on that one, but just in terms of comparing and contrasting that with a breakthrough therapy designation.
I'm not familiar with, I'd have to look it up, but can you share a little bit more about
It's specifically for regenerative medicine type drugs.
Oh, okay.
So I think for us as a Agonox, we are working on a adoptive T cell therapy. So I think that accelerated approval path might be our best option.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, like I said, there's a number of these, and I don't know the specifics on what is the benefit of getting the designation, but they clearly have carved out for regenerative medicine. And if I'm happy to have a discussion with you, give me a little time to review RMAT. And I don't work in regenerative medicine, so I'm not that familiar with the program, but I would imagine that it's probably very similar to the same incentives that are given by Breakthrough and others. And just because you have RMAT doesn't mean you couldn't have Breakthrough. You can apply for multiple. So I had a product that had Fast Track, that had QIDP and Breakthrough Therapy designation. And you can have multiple of these designations, and they're, offer some of the same things or not.
great, thank you.
Okay, so I have. Okay, perfect. From Brian Martin, this question here, given the unique mission spaces of the DoD and DHS CWMD programs, protecting warfighters and civilians against biological threat agents, engineered for high transmissibility, infectivity, and virulence, clinical trials for medical countermeasures targeting category A, B, C, and uncategorized agents are often neither ethical nor feasible. How is the FDA adapting its priority review and approval processes to assess MCMs based on mechanistic pathway disruption rather than traditional clinical efficacy data? Specifically, how does the agency evaluate submissions grounded in systems biology, omics-driven discovery, and surrogate endpoints derived from validated animal models under the animal rule or other expedited frameworks? We're increasingly relying on high-resolution analysis, such as disruption of the, I'm going to not say this very well, bradykinin kallikrein axis, or suppression of the type 1 interferon response to identify viable countermeasures in the absence of human challenge studies. In that context, how does the FDA balance evidentiary rigor with the operational urgency to authorize or fast-track deployment of such countermeasures under the EUA or other emergency mechanisms? That was a lot.
Oh, wow. I think the answers are embedded in the question. I mean, the agency uses the animal rule. I mean, we don't have circulating anthrax, so we consider the animal rule to approve drugs for biodefense. They're hoping that this voucher, this commissioner's voucher for that I talked about, that was announced in June, might incentivize companies to do that. And a lot of these programs are, sponsored by DoD, who works closely with the FDA to, you know, address the need for, say, our soldiers or people who are in harm's way because of some of these biowarfare agents. So again, the FDA encourages the DoD to come in and present. I mean, when I was working in the Office of Vaccines, we had a number of DoD projects and folks coming down from Fort Detrick to present. They are very welcoming to those interactions. So I think that FDA doesn't push them aside. They view them as very important therapeutics to consider. I don't know if I answered the question, but FDA realizes it, which is why we've got the animal rule. We didn't used to have an animal rule, if you recall. So they're understanding that you can't always do traditional trials for every type of therapeutic.
Okay, well, we're at time, so we will wrap it up here. I did want to mention that this is the number 3 of the 3-part series. And so the other 2 recordings, they do live on our YouTube page. I believe there's a link in the chat too for the previous session that we just did. If you have any further questions for Elizabeth, please feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn, and she'll probably be happy to talk with you there. I did want to say thank you so much, Elizabeth Gordon, for spending your time and your expertise with us. Really appreciate this. Sink your teeth into really informational sessions that you've done for us. Also, a big thanks to Rain Catalyst, which are our sponsor for this Lunch and Learn series. Someone did ask earlier if they're going to get a recording of this session, and the answer is yes. Hopefully by the end of the week, probably by Friday, expect an email from me with a link to the recording and also the PDF version of the slides that you saw today. Don't forget that the survey will pop up after this session. Please fill it out. And also we have upcoming events and programs, so be sure to check out our page for more information on that. Otherwise, thank you guys.